Welcome to today's edition of the CIO WaterCooler TV. This is part of a series that's in conjunction with IBM, looking at a number of trends within the leadership market. And today we're talking all about automate. To help me do that, I'm joined by Tim Bolam from DHL. Tim, before we get into anything else, do you just want to tell us what exactly you do for DHL?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Tim Bolam. I'm the Vice President of Project Delivery, which means basically anything that moves in what we call a new startup, whether that be technology-based or whether that be everything else to do with our business, building a warehouse, fitting that out, employing people, designing processes, comes under the purview of me and my team. We have about 100 strong people delivering in excess of 150 projects annually for DHL supply chain and their customers.
I suppose as soon as people start thinking about manufacturing or factories these days, they probably kind of immediately think of those huge warehouses that you see on TVs and adverts, which look fairly automated. But that's very simplistic. From your perspective as an expert, what does automation actually mean to you and your organisation?
I think we're all learning. But what does automation mean? For me, it means streamlining, making our processes more efficient, but also taking away some of those commoditized elements of that process to allow our people to focus on the more value-adding parts of the process where you can't particularly commoditize or automate that. And making sure that where we do automate, you do it for the right reasons. You're not automating for automating's sake. And you've got to allow your people to focus on the bits that can't be automated because our people are our biggest asset, and we need to focus them on the more value-adding parts.
It's interesting that you talk there about value-adding parts. I mean, automation, if applied incorrectly, could lock in bad processes. So before you automate, how do you make sure that you've optimized those processes to avoid that?
Yeah, I think that's key. Otherwise, you end up with a more efficient bad process, really. I think what you need to do is you need to understand what that as-is process is, and you don't need to understand that from the people who purport to know what the process is. You need to understand that from the people who actually operate that process on a day-to-day basis. And we do that in a number of different ways. And I think when you get down to the people who operate that process, you understand what actually happens, as aside from what was supposed to happen when it was originally designed. So I think you've got to understand the decision when you look at that process. Is it worth automating? Will you derive a benefit from that automation? Then we've got to focus on re-engineering the process if the decision is, yes, it would benefit from automation. And you've got to design that, I suppose, in a number of ways. So we do it through something called OMS, which is Operational Maturity System. And that's something that's been designed across our global business. And it really takes the best practice of how to operate a warehouse and a set of processes, and then replicates that in all of our existing facilities. But any new startup that we do, we start with our best version of that best process as the standard that we deploy. We have a team of people who are OMS engineers and first choice engineers, which is all about quality and first choice. And these people look for unoptimized processes and then help the operation to deploy that best practice. And if it's a new process, then let's design that from the outset to run an optimal process.
You described there some of the processes that are needed to be put in place. But what are the barriers to automation typically?
I suppose there are a number of different barriers. And I suppose it depends on the way that you look at investment. So automation can be quite expensive. Mm-hmm. And historically, you tend to have seen automation go through a bit of a cycle. Certainly over the last 40 or 50 years, you tend to go through a cycle of, for 15 years, people are deploying automation because it's great and it derives a benefit. And then for the following 7 years, people are ripping automation out so they can get different equipment in or different configurations of warehouses. But I think post the pandemic, I think we've seen a different shift in that conundrum. So I don't think we're now stuck in a cycle. I think with the economic climate, with the current employment market, and I suppose space facilitization and the lack of land, people are now driving automation as a solution to that. And I suppose it really depends on whether you're talking about hard mechanization or soft mechanization in terms of robotics and that type of automation. But I think we understand this by going through a number of stages. One is you've got to do some value stream mapping, so you truly understand from the people doing the process, is this ripe for automation? Because otherwise that barrier will be you're going in and you're trying to automate a process. It's not worth doing. If you think automation is the right thing, then you've got to design this first, build a facility around the automation, but also understand what's the right resourcing model to support that automation and the whole operation around it. What you don't want to do is design a build and then try and squeeze the automation in and go in with a resourcing model that actually what you're doing is tweaking a manual resourcing solution to try and fit a automated solution. We found it particularly troublesome if you try and retrofit into an operation and don't actually adjust that resourcing organizational chart.
So you've mentioned a couple of approaches there, but if you're talking to your peer group, maybe they aren't as far down the automation journey as you are. Are there any kind of tips that you would suggest or ways of approaching a board if you're trying to get sponsorship to overcome some of those barriers?
I think if you're trying to convince a board to invest in automation, it can feel a bit like betting the farm. And I think what you need to do is you need to engage with the OEMs, so the original equipment manufacturers like your Knaps, your Swiss Logs, your Dematic's, and get a proper working relationship with them. You need to have some really skilled SMEs within your business who understand how to design, implement, and also operate an automated solution. Because it's great to design it with the automation providers and the customers and then implement it. But if you don't know how to run an operation in an automized way, you're really going to struggle, and it becomes a bit of a void of discovery. And that benefits case, you will really struggle to deliver.
Last question then. It's always that once you actually implement that you get real world learnings. Could you describe some situations where automation's had a negative impact, possibly to avoid, but also then where it's had a positive impact?
Yeah, I always like to start with the positive before the negative. I think we've had some recent experiences, and some that are actually still in the implementation phase of now. So we've deployed a 100,000 pallet automated ASRS system into a brand new warehouse. One in the kind of East Midlands region, and then we're replicating that down in the Tilbury Docks in London. And that's been a really pleasing experience because from the outset, we did that value stream mapping. So we truly understood what the process was. And we designed that with the principal contractor of the building so that we knew where it was going. We knew where to move the stanchions. So it didn't have a knock-on impact to the automation. We had some key skilled SMEs who understood it. We worked quite closely with the OEM manufacturer, and then we tested it to the hilt. Yeah, that kind of factory acceptance testing, the volume throughput testing, and then the mock shifting is key to making sure you have success with automation. On the downside, we have had some poor experiences. Not catastrophic, but poor. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've done some lessons learned on it, but you can kind of trace it back to the original assumptions that were made. It was an existing facility in mainland Europe that we ran for a particular customer. I think we made some flawed assumptions around we could lift and shift that solution into a new geographic location, a different facility, with a different resourcing model, and it would work. And I think we really struggled to fit it into a different facility. I don't think we'd done that value stream mapping to truly understand that process. And it was a very, very complex automation solution with a tote retrieval system, with lots and lots of conveyors, with automated wrapping and parcel sorting. And we didn't understand the process sufficiently to understand what the pinch points were through that conveyor system to get it to a pack bench.
Look, Tim, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. There's some great insight there for the peer community. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, David.